I'm Allison, 32 years old, and I never imagined our family Christmas dinner would end with my sister slapping my 6-month-old daughter across her tiny cheek. One moment we were all gathered around the table enjoying ham and mashed potatoes, and the next little Emma was screaming as my sister Jennifer claimed she was just trying to quiet her down. The silence that followed was deafening until my husband, a military commander, stood up and changed everything. If you're watching this, please like and subscribe to hear how one horrible moment transformed our family forever. My relationship with my sister Jennifer has always been complicated. Growing up, we were close in age, just 2 years apart, but worlds apart in personality. I was the quiet, studious one who followed rules and avoided confrontation. Jennifer was bold, outspoken, and constantly testing boundaries. Our parents often said we balanced each other out, but looking back, I can see how Jennifer's behavior was often enabled rather than addressed. When we were teenagers, the dynamic shifted. Jennifer's boldness turned into something darker: jealousy. Every achievement of mine became something she needed to compete with or diminish. When I made honor roll, she would call it boring and remind everyone how many friends she had. When I got accepted to my dream college, she somehow made the dinner celebration about her plans instead. I always made excuses for her. That's just Jennifer being Jennifer, I would say. She doesn't mean anything by it. I convinced myself that our sisterly bond was stronger than these moments of pettiness. I wanted so badly to believe we had the close sister relationship I saw in movies and read about in books. Then I met James during my final year of college. He was already in the military, focused and disciplined in a way I found instantly attractive. He had these clear, unwavering principles about loyalty, integrity, and protecting those you care about. After our third date, I knew I wanted to marry him. Jennifer met James at our parents' 4th of July barbecue. I watched her size him up, that familiar competitive gleam in her eye. A military guy, huh? I dated someone in the Air Force once. Got bored of all the rules. James just smiled politely. Later he whispered to me, "Your sister seems interesting." The diplomatic understatement made me laugh. Our wedding was beautiful, though Jennifer, my maid of honor, somehow managed to give a speech that was more about her than us. James noticed my disappointment but squeezed my hand under the table. "Today is perfect because I'm marrying you," he said. "Nothing else matters." Over the next few years, James rose steadily through the ranks. His natural leadership abilities and strategic mind made him an ideal commander. I was so proud watching him take on increasing responsibilities, knowing how seriously he took the welfare of everyone under his command. When I became pregnant with Emma, Jennifer's reaction was strange. She smiled and congratulated me, but there was something off about it. "Wow, so you're really going full military wife now, huh, baby and all?" she said, as if I was following some cliché rather than starting a family with the man I loved. Throughout my pregnancy, Jennifer was oddly distant. She skipped my baby shower, claiming a last-minute work emergency. She rarely asked how I was feeling or showed interest in preparations for the baby. When Emma was born, a perfect pink-cheeked miracle with James's blue eyes and my dark hair, Jennifer sent flowers rather than visiting. The card read, "Congrats on your new addition. Sorry I can't make it right now, swamped at work. Love, Jay." Our parents, true to form, made excuses for Jennifer. "She's just busy with her new job," Mom said. "And you know Jennifer has never been comfortable around babies." Dad nodded along, always the peacekeeper, never the confronter. In the 6 months since Emma's birth, Jennifer had only visited twice, both times for less than an hour. She held Emma awkwardly, as if my daughter was a foreign object she couldn't quite figure out. When Emma cried, Jennifer would immediately hand her back to me with a look of relief. Despite this history, I was hopeful about Christmas. It would be Emma's first holiday season, and I wanted to create wonderful memories with our whole family. I spent weeks preparing, decorating our home on base, with twinkling lights and greenery, selecting the perfect gifts, planning a traditional dinner with all the trimmings. I even found a tiny red velvet dress for Emma with a matching bow headband. When I sent the invitation to Jennifer, I attached a photo of Emma in her Christmas outfit, hoping to spark some aunt-niece bonding. "We'll be there," she texted back. No mention of Emma's picture, no comment about how cute she looked, just a simple confirmation. I pushed away my disappointment and focused on making everything perfect. Our parents arrived first on Christmas Day, bearing gifts and eager to see their granddaughter. Dad immediately scooped Emma up, making silly faces that had her giggling. Mom bustled into the kitchen, ready to help with last-minute preparations. James's parents couldn't make it this year. His father was recovering from hip surgery, but they had visited the week before, showering Emma with love and presents. James's mom had crocheted Emma a beautiful baby blanket, and his dad had built a wooden rocking horse she would grow into. Everything was going so well. The house smelled of roasting turkey and cinnamon. Christmas music played softly in the background. Emma was being passed from grandparent to grandparent, soaking up the attention. James, dressed in a festive sweater, rather than his uniform, kept catching my eye across the room and smiling. Then Jennifer arrived 2 hours late and without explanation. She brought a bottle of wine but no gifts for anyone. Her eyes darted around our decorated home with what looked like criticism rather than appreciation. "Sorry I'm late," she said, not sounding sorry at all. "Traffic was a nightmare. Cute place you've got here. Very military housing chic." She kissed my cheek quickly before heading straight to the kitchen to open her wine. I should have known then that this Christmas wasn't going to be the harmonious family gathering I had hoped for. But I was determined to make it work for Emma's sake, for everyone's sake. I wanted so badly to have one perfect family holiday. If only I had realized what that determination would cost us all. The signs were there from the moment Jennifer walked through our door. While everyone else had immediately gravitated toward Emma cooing over her holiday outfit, Jennifer barely glanced at my daughter. Instead, she poured herself a generous glass of wine and launched into a story about her recent promotion. "The partners practically begged me to take the position," she said, swirling her wine. "Said no one else could handle the pressure." She looked pointedly at me as she added, "Of course not everyone wants a serious career. Some people prefer the simple life." Mom caught my eye and gave a small shake of her head. Our familiar signal. Don't engage, keep the peace. I focused on arranging the appetizers instead. James came up behind me, resting his hand gently on my waist. "Need help with anything, love?" he asked. "I've got it," I said, leaning into his solid presence. "Can you check on Emma? I think Dad's had her long enough." James nodded, but before he left, he whispered, "Everything okay with Jennifer? She seems tense." "Just Jennifer being Jennifer," I replied with my usual excuse. James gave me a look that suggested he wasn't convinced, but didn't push further. An hour into the gathering, Emma started getting fussy. She was usually such a good baby, but all the excitement and new faces had thrown off her schedule. I picked her up from her playmat, bouncing her gently. "Someone needs a nap," I said, smiling apologetically to everyone. "Or someone needs to learn that the world doesn't revolve around them," Jennifer muttered loud enough for everyone to hear. The room went awkwardly silent. Dad cleared his throat and quickly changed the subject. "How about those holiday bonuses at work, Jennifer? You mentioned something about that last week." I took Emma to the nursery, my cheeks burning with embarrassment and the first flickers of anger. As I settled her into her crib, I heard a soft knock at the door. James peered in. "Your sister is in rare form today," he said, keeping his voice low. "She's just jealous Emma's getting all the attention," I replied, trying to sound casual, even as I felt a knot forming in my stomach. James frowned. "There's a difference between jealousy and hostility, Allison. The way she looks at Emma." He trailed off, shaking his head. "What do you mean?" I asked, suddenly concerned. "I don't know exactly. It's just not normal. Not how an aunt should look at her niece." He came fully into the room, closing the door behind him. "I've seen that look before in the military. It's the look someone has when they're sizing up a threat." I almost laughed. "A threat? Emma's a 6-month-old baby." "I know it sounds ridiculous," James admitted. "But I've learned to trust my instincts about people. Just Keep an eye on them, okay? I promised I would, though I thought he was overreacting. Jennifer might be difficult and self-centered, but she wouldn't see an infant as a threat. That was absurd. When Emma woke from her nap, we rejoined the family in the living room. Jennifer was on her third glass of wine, her voice slightly louder, her gestures more expansive. She was telling our parents about her recent vacation to Cabo, emphasizing how expensive and exclusive the resort had been. As I sat down with Emma on my lap, Jennifer paused mid-story. Is the baby going to be quiet now? I was just getting to the good part. She just woke up, I said, trying to keep my tone light. She'll probably be chatty for a while. Jennifer rolled her eyes. Great, another interruption. Dad laughed nervously. Babies will be babies. Remember how you used to scream for hours, Jennifer? Your mother and I thought we'd never sleep again. I doubt I was that annoying. Jennifer said, her eyes fixed on Emma with a strange intensity. As the afternoon progressed, Emma became the inadvertent center of a growing tension. Every coo, every babble, every normal baby sound seemed to grate on Jennifer's nerves. I found myself constantly moving rooms with Emma, trying to give Jennifer space, trying to keep the peace. During a moment alone in the kitchen, Mom approached me. Jennifer seems a bit on edge today, she said, helping me prepare the dinner rolls. A bit. I couldn't keep the sarcasm from my voice. She's been glaring at Emma like she's plotting something. Mom sighed. You know your sister has always struggled with sharing attention, and the holidays are stressful for everyone. That's not an excuse for how she's acting, Mom. I know, sweetie. Just try to be patient, for today. She patted my arm and returned to the dining room. By the time we sat down for dinner, Jennifer had finished the bottle of wine she brought and opened another from our cabinet without asking. Her cheeks were flushed, her movements slightly uncoordinated. I placed Emma in her high chair between James and me, as far from Jennifer as the table would allow. Dad carved the turkey while Mom served the sides. James led a brief toast, thanking everyone for coming together to celebrate Emma's first Christmas. I noticed Jennifer didn't raise her glass for the toast. For a few minutes, things seemed to calm down. The food was delicious. The conversation stayed on safe topics, like the unusually warm December weather and the light display at the community center. I began to relax, thinking maybe we'd turned a corner. Then Emma started to fuss. Nothing major, just the normal sounds of a baby who had been good all day and was reaching her limit. I offered her a soft, teething ring, which she gummed happily for a moment before dropping it on the floor. I'll get it, James said, but Jennifer's voice cut across the table. Does she have to make noise through the entire meal? Some of us are trying to enjoy our dinner. The harsh tone made Emma's lower lip tremble. I reached for her, ready to take her to another room if needed, but Jennifer wasn't finished. You know, Allison, not everyone finds your baby as fascinating as you do. Some of us would like one conversation that isn't interrupted by crying or cooing or whatever noises she's making now. She's a baby, Jennifer, I said, feeling my patience slipping. Babies make noise. Well, maybe babies shouldn't be at the dinner table then, she snapped, stabbing at her turkey with unnecessary force. Maybe you should put her somewhere else so the adults can talk. James set down his fork, his expression hardening. Emma is family. She belongs at this table as much as anyone, Jennifer sneered. Of course you'd say that. Perfect military man with his perfect wife and perfect baby. The rest of us mere mortals just have to endure it, all right. An uncomfortable silence fell over the table. I could see Dad mentally calculating how to defuse the situation, Mom looking worriedly between Jennifer and me. Emma chose that moment to let out a particularly loud squeal, not crying, just the excited noise babies make when they're testing their voices. It echoed in the tense silence. What happened next occurred so quickly I could barely process it. Jennifer's face contorted with rage. She lunged across the table, her arm extending toward Emma, and before anyone could react, she slapped my baby daughter across her tiny cheek. The sound, that terrible crack of hand against soft skin, seemed to hang in the air. For a split second, everyone froze in shock. Then Emma's face crumpled, and she began to scream in pain and fear. As I reached for my daughter in horror, Jennifer sat back in her chair, her expression shifting from rage to defensive indignation. She wouldn't stop making noise, she said as if that explained everything. I just wanted her to be quiet for 1 minute. In that moment, I knew our family would never be the same again. And I had no idea what would happen next. Emma's piercing cries broke through my frozen shock. I scooped her up from her high chair, my hands shaking as I cradled her against my chest. Her tiny cheek was bright red, the clear imprint of Jennifer's hand visible on her delicate skin. My baby's tears soaked into my sweater as she clung to me, terrified by the sudden violence from someone who should have only shown her love. "Shh, you're safe now, Mommy's got you," I whispered, but my voice trembled with rage that threatened to explode. I couldn't believe what had just happened. My own sister had struck my infant daughter. I looked up to see the rest of my family still seated at the table, their faces registering various degrees of shock. My father stared at his plate, refusing to make eye contact. My mother's hand was pressed against her mouth, her eyes wide, but she remained silent. No one moved. No one spoke up. They just sat there as if waiting for the moment to pass, for normalcy to somehow return after this unforgivable act. Jennifer broke the silence first. "Oh, come on, Allison," she said with an exaggerated eye roll. "You're overreacting. It wasn't even that hard. She's fine." "Fine?" I choked out the word, holding Emma tighter as she continued to cry. "You slapped a 6-month-old baby across the face, and you think she's fine." "Babies are more resilient than you think," Jennifer replied, reaching for her wine glass with steady hands, as if she hadn't just assaulted a helpless infant. "Maybe if you weren't so precious about every little thing, she wouldn't be so sensitive." I looked to my parents, hoping they would finally step in. My mother lowered her hand from her mouth. For a moment I thought she would defend me. Instead, she said softly, "Jennifer, that wasn't appropriate, but Allison, I'm sure your sister didn't mean to hit her that hard. Let's just all calm down." "Didn't mean to," I repeated incredulously. She reached across the table and deliberately slapped my child. "There's no didn't mean to about it." My father finally looked up, his expression pained, but his voice conciliatory. "These things happen in families, Allison. Jennifer's had a bit too much to drink. Let's not make this bigger than it is." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My own parents were minimizing an assault on their granddaughter. The family I thought would always protect Emma was instead protecting her attacker. Jennifer seemed bolstered by our parents' reaction. "See, everyone knows you're being dramatic. This is why no one can ever tell you anything, Allison. You always take everything so personally." "This isn't about me." My voice rose as Emma's cries began to subside into hiccuping sobs. "This is about you hitting a baby, my baby, because you couldn't handle her making normal baby sounds." I felt utterly betrayed. I looked around the table at the family I'd always tried so hard to please, always compromised to keep happy. They were all looking anywhere but at Emma's red cheek or my tear-streaked face. The turkey was getting cold, the gravy was congealing. My family was falling apart, and they were worried about ruining Christmas dinner. Then from the other side of the table I heard the scrape of a chair being pushed back. James stood up, his movements deliberate and controlled. In that moment he wasn't wearing his uniform, but the commander in him was unmistakable. His posture straightened, his chin lifted, and his eyes, usually warm when looking at family, turned steely cold as they fixed on Jennifer. The room fell completely silent. Even Emma quieted, perhaps sensing the shift in energy. My husband didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His words carried across the table with the precision and authority that had earned him respect from hundreds of military personnel under his command. "Jennifer," he said, her name sounding like a formal declaration in his measured tone. "You just struck my child. You will never touch her again. You will never speak to her again until you have demonstrated that you are no longer a threat to her safety. Right now, you will get your coat and you will leave our home." Jennifer's smug expression faltered. She looked around the table for support, but something in James's demeanor made everyone shrink back. "You can't kick me out," she protested, her voice suddenly less confident. "This is a family dinner. Tell him, Mom. Tell him he can't just order me around like one of his soldiers." My mother looked down at her plate. My father cleared his throat but said nothing. James didn't blink. I'm not ordering a soldier. I'm protecting my child from someone who has proven they will harm her. You struck an infant Jennifer. There is no world in which that is acceptable. It was just a slap. Jennifer's voice rose, becoming shrill. God, you military types are all the same. Everything's a threat. Everyone's an enemy. It's Christmas, for Christ's sake. James remained perfectly still, his gaze unwavering. Yes, it's Christmas. A day when families show love and care for each other. What you showed my daughter wasn't love. It was cruelty. And I will not allow cruelty in our home, especially toward the most vulnerable member of our family. Now, for the last time, get your coat and leave. Jennifer looked desperately toward my parents. Mom, Dad, are you really going to let him talk to me like this? Are you going to let him throw me out on Christmas? My father shifted uncomfortably, but still wouldn't meet her eyes. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line. We should all just take a moment, my mother finally said. Cool heads, everyone. Jennifer made a mistake. Let's not ruin the holiday over one mistake. I felt a surge of disappointment so acute it was almost physical pain. They still weren't going to stand up for Emma. They were still going to excuse Jennifer as they always had. But James wasn't having it. He turned his attention to my parents, his voice still calm, but now tinged with disappointment. With all due respect, what happened wasn't a mistake. It was a deliberate action against a child. Your grandchild. If you want to leave with Jennifer, I understand. But she is leaving one way or another. There was no mistaking the finality in his tone. Jennifer must have recognized it too, because her expression changed from defiance to something else, fear. Perhaps for the first time she realized her actions had consequences she couldn't talk her way out of. Slowly she pushed her chair back and stood up. Fine, she said, trying to maintain her dignity. If that's how it's going to be. But don't think I'll forget this, Allison. Your husband threatening me, throwing me out. Don't come crying to me when your perfect military marriage falls apart under all his rules and orders. She snatched her purse from the living room and shoved her arms into her coat, making as much noise as possible. At the door, she turned back, perhaps expecting someone to stop her. No one did. James stood like a sentinel, watching to ensure she actually left. I held Emma close, one hand protectively cupping the back of her head. The door slammed behind Jennifer with a force that made the Christmas wreath bounce against the wood. The silence that followed was deafening. In that moment, I knew our family dynamics had irrevocably changed. James had drawn a line that could never be uncrossed. And I discovered that the husband I'd always loved for his gentleness and strength was also a man who would stand alone against everyone else if it meant protecting our daughter. The dinner was ruined, the holiday atmosphere shattered. But as I looked down at Emma, now calm in my arms, her cheek no longer bearing the red mark of her aunt's hand, I knew we'd done exactly what parents should do. We'd protected our child when no one else would. The front door had barely closed behind Jennifer when my mother burst into tears. How could you? She sobbed, looking at James. How could you throw your sister-in-law out on Christmas? What will people think? I stared at her in disbelief. Emma still clutched protectively in my arms. What will people think, Mom? Jennifer slapped your granddaughter across the face. Why are you worried about appearances instead of Emma's safety? My father reached over to pat my mother's hand. Now, Allison, your mother is upset. This isn't how any of us wanted Christmas to go. Perhaps we should all take a step back and calm down. I am calm, James said, still standing. And I stand by my decision. No one who strikes a child is welcome in our home, family or not. The tension in the room was unbearable. Emma, sensing the distress around her, began to whimper again. I stood up, needing to distance myself from my parents' disappointing reaction. I'm going to put Emma down for a nap, I said. She's been through enough today. James nodded. I'll come with you. In the quiet of the nursery, I gently laid Emma in her crib. Her blue eyes, so like her father's, looked up at me with complete trust that broke my heart. The mark on her cheek had faded, but I couldn't stop seeing the moment Jennifer's hand connected with her soft skin. I'm so sorry, baby girl. I whispered, stroking her dark hair. I'm so sorry I didn't protect you better. James wrapped an arm around my waist, pulling me close. You have nothing to be sorry for. This isn't your fault. I should have seen it coming, I said, the guilt washing over me. You warned me something was off with Jennifer. I should have kept Emma away from her. Allison, look at me. James turned me gently to face him. No one expects their own sister to hit their baby. You trusted your family as anyone would. The fault lies entirely with Jennifer, not you. Emma's eyes began to droop, the emotional exhaustion of the day catching up to her. We stood watching her drift off to sleep, her tiny chest rising and falling peacefully. What do we do now? I asked quietly, not wanting to wake her. We go back out there and finish this, James said firmly. Your parents need to understand that this isn't something we can just smooth over. Back in the dining room, my parents were huddled together, speaking in hushed tones. They fell silent as we entered. The food sat cold and forgotten on the table, a sad reminder of the holiday meal that should have been. Is Emma okay? My father asked, his voice tentative. She will be, I said. No thanks to Jennifer. My mother dabbed at her eyes with a napkin. Allison, I know you're upset, but Jennifer is your sister. Family forgives. No, Mom. Family protects, I corrected her. Jennifer crossed a line that can't be uncrossed. She's been under a lot of pressure at work, my father offered. And you know holidays are hard for her. She probably just snapped for a moment. James sat down across from them, his posture straight, but not threatening. With respect, sir, that's not an excuse. In the military, we learn that pressure doesn't justify harmful actions. It reveals character. My mother's expression hardened. This isn't the military, James. This is family. We handle things differently. Do you? I asked, my voice breaking. Because from where I stand, it looks like you're handling it by excusing inexcusable behavior, just like you always have with Jennifer. A flash of guilt crossed my father's face. That's not fair, Allison. Isn't it my entire life Jennifer has been allowed to say and do whatever she wants? When she ruined my high school graduation party by making a scene, you said she was just jealous and I should be the bigger person. When she gave that self-centered speech at my wedding, you told me to let it go, because that's just how Jennifer is. And now she physically assaults my child, and you're still making excuses for her. My words hung in the air. For the first time, I saw my parents truly hear me. My mother's shoulders sagged, and my father looked away, unable to meet my gaze. We never thought, my mother began, then stopped. We never thought it would go this far. But it did, James said quietly. And now we need to be clear about what happens next. My father straightened in his chair. What do you mean? I mean that Jennifer is not welcome around Emma until she acknowledges what she did, apologizes sincerely, and gets help for whatever issues drove her to harm a baby. James's voice was firm, but not unkind. And I mean that anyone who minimizes what happened or pressures Allison to just forgive is also not helping. My phone buzzed on the table. Jennifer's name flashed on the screen. I turned it over without reading the message. She's already trying to spin this, I said wearily. She'll tell everyone I overreacted, that James was controlling, that it wasn't a big deal. Let her, James replied. Anyone who thinks hitting a baby isn't a big deal isn't someone whose opinion matters. My parents exchanged glances. I could see the internal struggle, their desire to keep peace warring with the undeniable wrongness of what Jennifer had done. We should go, my father finally said, pushing back from the table. This has been a lot to process. My mother nodded, her earlier tears dried. We'll talk to Jennifer, make her understand. Will you? I couldn't keep the skepticism from my voice. Or will you listen to her version and decide it's easier to pressure me to forgive than to hold her accountable? My father looked pained. That's not fair, Allison. I'm not interested in fair anymore, Dad. I'm interested in protecting my daughter. If you can't support that, then we have nothing more to discuss. They gathered their coats in silence. At the door, my mother turned back, her expression conflicted. We love Emma. You know that, right? I know you do, I said softly. But love without action isn't enough. Not anymore. After they left, James and I stood in our living room surrounded by the remnants of Christmas, the twinkling tree, the half-opened presents, the decorations that had seemed so festive just hours before. Now they felt like props in a play where everyone had forgotten their lines. I'll clean up, James offered, but I shook my head. Not yet. Just sit with me for a minute. We sank onto the couch, emotionally drained. James pulled me close and I rested my head on his shoulder. Thank you, I whispered. For what? For standing up for Emma when no one else would. For being the one person in that room who saw what mattered most. James pressed a kiss to my forehead. Always. You and Emma are my family, my responsibility, my joy. I will always stand between you and anyone who would harm you, no matter who they are. As night fell outside our window, the Christmas lights cast soft shadows across the room. In the nursery, Emma slept peacefully, unaware of how her world had shifted today. In the silence, James and I sat together, bound by a love deeper than family ties or holiday traditions, the fierce protective love of parents who would reshape their entire world to keep their child safe. My phone continued to buzz throughout the evening. Messages from Jennifer, from my parents, from extended family, who had already heard versions of the story. I ignored them all. Tomorrow would be time enough to deal with the fallout. Tonight was for healing, for remembering what truly mattered. Merry Christmas, James whispered as midnight approached. Is it still? I asked. He nodded, his eyes serious. Maybe not the Christmas we planned, but we protected our daughter today. In my book, that makes it one of the most important days of our lives. In the quiet of our living room, surrounded by the wreckage of holiday expectations, but secure in the strength of our little family unit, I had to agree. Some presents couldn't be wrapped in shiny paper or placed under a tree. Today, Emma had received the most valuable gift of all parents, who would stand against the world to keep her safe, even when it broke their hearts to do so. The days after Christmas unfolded in a blur of tension and difficult conversations. My phone became a battleground of conflicting narratives as Jennifer worked overtime to control the story. You won't believe what Allison and her control-freak husband did, she texted our cousin Sarah. Threw me out of Christmas dinner because I lightly tapped Emma when she wouldn't stop screaming. Military guy thinks he's still commanding troops instead of at a family dinner. Sarah, to her credit, didn't immediately take Jennifer's side. That doesn't sound like Allison or James, she replied. What really happened? Jennifer never responded to that message, instead moving on to more receptive audiences. By the end of the week, our extended family had divided into factions, those who believed Jennifer's version, those who were skeptical but wanted everyone to move on for the sake of the family, and the precious few who reached out directly to ask for our side of the story. My parents straddled an uncomfortable middle ground. My mother called daily, her messages increasingly desperate. Jennifer feels terrible, Allison, she said on day 3. She was just overwhelmed and had too much to drink. You know she would never deliberately hurt Emma. But she did hurt Emma, Mom, I replied, standing firm despite the painful squeeze in my chest. Deliberately, with an open hand across the face. People make mistakes, my mother insisted. Hitting a baby isn't a mistake. It's an action with consequences. Each call ended the same way, with my mother in tears and me feeling simultaneously guilty and resolute. James would find me afterward, eyes red-rimmed, and simply hold me until the storm of emotions passed. You're doing the right thing, he would reassure me, no matter how hard it feels. Jennifer's messages cycled through predictable phases. First came anger. You've always been jealous that I have a real career while you play house on a military base. Then self-pity. I guess the perfect sister doesn't need me in her life anymore. Finally, minimization wrapped in a thin veneer of apology. I'm sorry if you feel I was too rough with Emma, but babies need to learn boundaries too. None of these approaches worked. James had taught me about a concept from his military training called maintaining your position, the idea that sometimes holding your ground is the only acceptable strategy, especially when the stakes are high. In combat, there are positions you cannot yield, he explained one night, as we sat on our back porch watching the stars after Emma was asleep. Not because you're stubborn, but because the cost of retreat is too high. This is one of those times, Allison. The safety of our child is non-negotiable ground. A week after Christmas, my father made a solo visit to our home. He looked older somehow, the lines around his eyes deeper than I remembered. "Your mother doesn't know I'm here," he admitted, accepting the coffee I offered. "She thinks I'm running errands." "Why the secrecy?" I asked, though I already suspected the answer. He sighed, turning the mug in his hands. "Your mother is torn, Allison. She loves you and Emma, but Jennifer has always needed more from us. More support, more understanding, more forgiveness. More enabling," I corrected gently. My father winced but didn't argue. "Maybe you're right. We've always worried that if we pushed too hard, set too many boundaries, she'd cut us off completely. And maybe in trying to keep her close, we've pushed you away instead." It was the closest my father had ever come to acknowledging the family dynamic that had shaped my entire life. I felt a rush of validation mixed with sadness. "I want to see Emma," he said after a moment. "If that's okay." I studied his face, searching for signs of an ulterior motive. Finding none, I nodded and led him to the living room where Emma was practicing her new favorite skill, rolling from back to front and getting stuck. My father's face softened as he watched her. "May I?" he asked, gesturing toward her. I nodded, and he knelt beside her playmat, his movements careful as if approaching a wild animal he was afraid of startling. "Hello there, little one," he said softly. "Grandpa's missed you." Emma looked up at him with curious eyes before breaking into a gummy smile that made my heart ache. Even after everything, she had no fear, no distrust. I envied her clean slate, her ability to judge each moment on its own merits rather than through the lens of painful history. My father played with her for nearly an hour, his earlier discomfort melting away in the face of her innocent joy. When she finally tired and I put her down for a nap, he remained seated, looking troubled again. "Jennifer needs help, Allison," he said abruptly. "Professional help. Your mother and I have discussed it, and we're going to insist she see someone." I was stunned into momentary silence. "Really? You're actually going to confront her?" He nodded, looking both determined and terrified. "What happened at Christmas? It opened my eyes to something I think I've always known but didn't want to face. Jennifer's behavior isn't normal. It isn't healthy. And it isn't something more understanding or patience can fix." "How did Mom take that realization?" I asked, unable to imagine my mother accepting such a harsh truth about her favored daughter. "Not well initially," he admitted. "She wanted to believe it was just a bad day, too much wine, holiday stress. But I asked her to imagine if it had been someone else, a stranger or a friend who had slapped Emma. Would she be making the same excuses that got through to her, I think?" I felt a glimmer of hope that perhaps some good might come from this painful episode after all. What happens now? "We're meeting Jennifer for dinner tomorrow night. We're going to tell her that our relationship with her depends on her getting help and making amends. Real amends, not just words to you and Emma." His hands trembled slightly. "I'm scared, Allison. I've never stood up to her like this before." I reached across the table and squeezed his hand. "I'm proud of you, Dad." His eyes filled with tears. "I should have done it years ago. I should have protected you better when you were growing up. I'm sorry, Allison. I'm so sorry." We sat together in a moment of shared grief for what our family could have been, should have been. But there was also a strange sense of liberation. The truth, long buried under layers of denial and accommodation, was finally being acknowledged. When James came home from work that evening, I told him about my father's visit. He listened thoughtfully, his expression cautiously optimistic. "It's a start," he said. "But remember, people don't change overnight. Your parents have decades of patterns to break. And Jennifer—" He hesitated. "What about Jennifer? I've seen people like your sister before in the military. People who can't accept responsibility, who always see themselves as the victim, who lash out when they feel threatened. He took my hand. Some of them can change with proper help, with real consequences for their actions. But some can't or won't. We need to be prepared for either outcome. You don't think she'll actually get help, do you? I asked. James considered his words carefully. I think your parents trying to set boundaries is a positive step, regardless of how Jennifer responds. But no, I don't think she'll accept responsibility easily. She has too much invested in her self-image as the wronged party. His assessment proved painfully accurate. The next day, my father called, his voice tight with stress. It didn't go well, he reported grimly. She stormed out before we even finished explaining why we wanted her to get help. Said we were choosing you over her, that we'd always favored you, that everyone was overreacting to one tiny mistake. I'm sorry, Dad, I said, meaning it. Despite everything, I took no pleasure in my sister's continued refusal to acknowledge the harm she'd caused. Your mother's upset. She wants to try again, thinks maybe we came on too strong. He sounded tired. I told her we need to stand firm. It's not easy, Allison. Decades of habits don't break in a day. Over the following weeks, a new pattern emerged. Jennifer would refuse to engage, my parents would waver, then find their resolve again. 2 steps forward, 1 step back. It was messy, imperfect progress, but it was progress nonetheless. James and I focused on our little family, creating new routines and traditions to replace the ones that had been shattered. We celebrated Emma's developmental milestones. Her first attempts at crawling, her growing vocabulary of babbles and coos, her increasing curiosity about the world around her. In these quiet moments of family joy, I found healing. The pain of Christmas Day slowly receded, not forgotten, but no longer dominating every thought. Then, 6 weeks after the incident, I received an unexpected message from Jennifer. I need to talk to you, in person. No excuses, no blame, just talk, please. I stared at my phone for a long time before showing it to James. What do you think? I asked, genuinely uncertain. He considered the message carefully. I think it's worth hearing what she has to say, but not alone, and not with Emma present. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop on base, a neutral territory where James could be nearby, but not directly part of the conversation. Jennifer agreed to the conditions without argument, a promising sign in itself. When I saw her walk in, I was struck by how different she looked. The confident, borderline arrogant sister I knew had been replaced by someone who moved hesitantly, whose eyes darted around nervously, whose usual immaculate appearance seemed slightly disheveled. She sat across from me, hands wrapped around her coffee cup, as if seeking warmth despite the mild day outside. Thank you for agreeing to see me, she began, her voice lacking its usual sharp edge. What did you want to talk about? I asked, keeping my tone neutral. Jennifer took a deep breath. I've been seeing someone, a therapist, for about 3 weeks now. Of all the things I'd expected her to say, this wasn't one of them. Mom and Dad convinced you. She gave a short, humorless laugh. Not exactly. They tried, but you know me, the more someone pushes, the more I dig in my heels. She paused, collecting her thoughts. It was work, actually. I had a complete meltdown in a meeting. Screamed at a junior associate over a minor mistake. My boss pulled me aside afterward and said I either got help or got fired. I'm sorry to hear that, I said, surprised to find I meant it. Don't be. It needed to happen. She took a sip of her coffee. The thing is, once I started talking to this therapist, it wasn't just about work stress. It was about everything. The way I react to things. The way I see the world as constantly threatening or judging me. The way I've treated you all these years. I remained silent, not wanting to interrupt what seemed like a genuine moment of self-reflection. I've always been jealous of you, Allison. She continued, her voice barely above a whisper. You've always seemed so complete, so confident in who you are and what you want. I've spent my whole life feeling like I'm missing some essential piece that everyone else was born with. I never knew you felt that way, I admitted. From my perspective, you were the confident one, the bold one who always got what she wanted. Jennifer shook her head. That was all performance. Bravado. Inside, I've always felt like a fraud about to be exposed. She looked up, meeting my eyes directly. None of that excuses what I did to Emma. Nothing could excuse that. I was drunk and angry and jealous of a baby Allison, for having the love and attention I've always craved. And I lashed out in the most despicable way possible. Her eyes filled with tears. I'm not asking for forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I just wanted you to know that I'm trying to understand why I did what I did, so I can make sure it never happens again. I studied my sister's face, looking for signs of manipulation or insincerity. Finding none, I felt a complex mix of emotions: relief that she was getting help, caution born from years of disappointment, and a tiny fragile hope that perhaps real change was possible. Thank you for telling me this, I said carefully. It means a lot to hear you acknowledge what happened. My therapist says I have a lot of work to do before I can even think about being part of your lives again. Jennifer wiped her eyes. She's right. I know that. I just, I didn't want you to think I didn't care, or that I still believe I was right. We talked for another hour, covering ground we should have explored years ago: the competitive dynamic between us, the way our parents' enabling had harmed both of us in different ways, the possibility of a healthier relationship in the future. As we prepared to leave, Jennifer asked hesitantly, "How's Emma?" "She's wonderful," I said, allowing myself a small smile. "She's trying to crawl now. Gets up on her hands and knees and rocks back and forth, but hasn't quite figured out how to move forward yet." Jennifer nodded, her expression a mixture of sadness and something like wistfulness. "I'm glad. I hope, I hope someday I can know her. Be the kind of aunt she deserves." "I hope so too," I replied, surprised to realize I meant it. "But that day isn't today." "I know," she said simply. "I know." Walking back to where James waited, I felt lighter somehow. Not because everything was fixed, it wasn't, and might never be completely, but because for the first time there had been truth between my sister and me. Real, unvarnished truth, without the protective layers of denial and performance that had characterized our relationship for so long. "How did it go?" James asked, falling into step beside me. "Better than I expected," I admitted. "She's getting help. Actually getting help, not just saying the words." "And how do you feel about that?" I considered the question carefully. "Cautiously optimistic. She seems genuinely remorseful, not just sorry she got caught or called out. But it's early days. Real change takes time." James nodded. "And what about us? What boundaries do we need going forward?" "The same ones you set on Christmas," I said firmly. "No contact with Emma until Jennifer has demonstrated real change over time. No pressure from my parents to rush forgiveness or reunification." "I agree completely," James said, taking my hand. "Your sister has taken a positive first step, but trust has to be earned back slowly, especially where Emma's safety is concerned." As we walked home through the late winter afternoon, I reflected on the strange journey our family had taken since Christmas. The painful rupture, the difficult conversations, the slow, tentative steps toward healing. None of it would have happened without James taking that stand when everyone else sat silent. Without him looking my sister in the eye and saying the words no one had ever said to her before: "Your behavior has consequences. You cannot harm others and expect nothing to change." It was a hard lesson long overdue. And though the path forward remained uncertain, I felt a growing confidence that whatever came next, our little family, James, Emma, and I, would face it together, bound by the unshakable knowledge that we would always protect each other no matter what. 6 months passed, bringing summer heat and Emma's first birthday. The months had been filled with both challenges and growth as our family navigated the new boundaries established after Christmas. Jennifer continued her therapy, sending occasional updates without pushing for more contact than I was ready for. My parents had finally stopped trying to broker an immediate reconciliation and were working on their own issues with a family therapist. The extended family had largely come to understand the seriousness of what had happened, though a few still maintained that I was holding a grudge over one mistake. Through it all, James remained my steadfast partner, encouraging me when I wavered, and reminding me that protecting Emma wasn't about punishing Jennifer, it was about ensuring our daughter's safety and teaching her that she deserved to be treated with kindness and respect. Emma bloomed like a spring flower, unaware of the family drama surrounding her. She took her first steps at 10 months, toddling across our living room with determination before collapsing into my waiting arms. Her vocabulary grew from babbles to recognizable words: mama, dada, doggy, for any four-legged animal she encountered. Her personality emerged more clearly with each passing day, curious, persistent, and surprisingly empathetic for such a young child. As her first birthday approached, I faced a decision who to include in the celebration. After much thought and discussion with James, I decided to host two separate gatherings: a small family lunch where Jennifer would be invited, and a larger party the following day for friends and extended family. "Are you sure you're ready for this?" James asked when I proposed the idea. "There's no rush. We can wait until you feel completely comfortable." "I'm not sure I'll ever feel completely comfortable," I admitted. "But Jennifer has been doing the work. She's respected our boundaries, and she is Emma's aunt. I think it's time to take a small step forward with careful supervision." The arrangements were made. Jennifer would come to our home for a controlled visit, just 2 hours, with both James and me present at all times. My parents would attend as well, providing both additional supervision and a buffer if tensions arose. The day arrived bright and clear. I decorated our backyard with pink and white balloons and a homemade banner proclaiming "Happy First Birthday, Emma" Day. James grilled chicken while I prepared a simple lunch. Emma, dressed in a frilly birthday outfit, seemed to sense the excitement, clapping her hands and babbling happily as she played on a blanket spread across the grass. When the doorbell rang, I felt a nervous flutter in my stomach. James squeezed my hand reassuringly before I went to answer it. Jennifer stood on our porch looking both nervous and hopeful. She clutched a gift bag in one hand and a bouquet of daisies in the other. My parents hovered behind her, their expressions similarly anxious. "Hi," Jennifer said simply. "Thank you for inviting me." I nodded, stepping back to allow them entry. "Emma's in the backyard with James. We're keeping things low-key." Jennifer handed me the flowers. "These are for you. Not a bribe or anything, just a thank you for giving me another chance." The gesture was unexpectedly touching. In all our years of sibling rivalry and tension, Jennifer had rarely thought to bring me gifts unless there was a specific occasion that required it. We made our way to the backyard where James was keeping a watchful eye on Emma as she played with her toys. His posture straightened almost imperceptibly as Jennifer approached, a subtle reminder that while he was willing to support this reconnection attempt, his priority remained Emma's protection. Jennifer hung back, uncertain. "She's gotten so big," she said softly. "I barely recognize her." "Babies change quickly," my mother said, perhaps too brightly. "Just wait until she's running everywhere. You'll miss the crawling stage." I appreciated my mother's attempt to keep things light, but I also noticed that neither she nor my father moved to push Jennifer closer to Emma. They too had learned some hard lessons over the past 6 months. Lunch proceeded with careful conversation. My parents discussed their recent gardening projects. James shared a funny story about Emma discovering her shadow. Jennifer talked briefly about a photography class she had started taking. It wasn't the easy, flowing family gathering of my childhood dreams, but it was civil and even occasionally warm. After we ate, it was time for Emma's cake, a small sugar-free confection designed more for smashing than eating. I placed Emma in her high chair and put the cake in front of her, then stepped back to take photos. Emma stared at the cake in fascination before plunging both hands into the frosting. She let out a squeal of delight as the cake squished between her fingers, then brought her hands to her mouth to taste her conquest. Everyone laughed at her obvious enjoyment, the tension in the air momentarily dispelled by the pure, innocent joy of a baby discovering cake for the first time. "She's amazing, Allison," Jennifer said quietly, standing beside me as I captured the moment on camera. "You're a wonderful mother." The compliment delivered without a trace of her usual competitiveness or sarcasm caught me off guard. I turned to study my sister's face and saw genuine admiration there, and perhaps a hint of regret for what she had missed in Emma's life. "Thank you," I replied simply. After Emma was cleaned up from her cake adventure, Jennifer hesitantly approached with her gift. "May I give this to her?" she asked, looking to both James and me for permission. James nodded, his expression neutral but watchful. Jennifer knelt down to Emma's level, where she was now sitting on her play blanket again. "Hi, Emma," she said softly. "I'm your Aunt Jennifer. I brought you something for your birthday." Emma regarded this unfamiliar person with curious eyes. To my surprise, she didn't shy away as she sometimes did with strangers. Instead, she reached out a small hand toward Jennifer, not quite touching, but clearly interested. Jennifer placed the gift bag on the blanket between them. "Would you like to see what's inside?" I moved closer, ready to help Emma with the unwrapping, but my daughter had her own ideas. She grabbed the tissue paper sticking out of the bag and pulled, sending it fluttering to the ground with a delighted giggle. Inside was a soft, plush elephant, simple but high quality, perfect for a 1-year-old's hands. Emma immediately reached for it, bringing it to her face in a baby hug. "She loves elephants," I said, genuinely touched that Jennifer had chosen something so appropriate. "How did you know?" Jennifer glanced up with a small smile. "I asked Mom what she likes. I wanted to get it right." The simple statement revealed more about Jennifer's change than any grand gesture could have. The sister I knew 6 months ago would never have asked for help, never have admitted she didn't know something, never have put someone else's preferences before her own. As the afternoon progressed, I watched Jennifer interact with Emma from a respectful distance, offering toys, but not forcing herself into Emma's space, talking softly, following my daughter's lead, rather than imposing her own agenda. There was none of the jealousy or resentment I had seen at Christmas, none of the need to be the center of attention that had characterized Jennifer's behavior for as long as I could remember. When it was time for them to leave, Jennifer thanked us again for the invitation. "I know this wasn't easy for you," she said. "It means more than I can say that you were willing to give me this chance." "You've been doing the work," James said, his tone measured but not cold. "We recognize that." "It's been eye-opening," Jennifer admitted. "Painful sometimes, but necessary. My therapist says I've been carrying around anger since we were kids, using it as a shield against feeling vulnerable or inadequate." She glanced at our parents, who were saying goodbye to Emma. "I didn't realize how much damage I was doing to myself and everyone around me." "It takes courage to face those things," I said, finding myself genuinely impressed by her self-awareness. Jennifer shook her head. "Not as much courage as it took for you to stand up to me after years of giving in to keep the peace, or for James to throw me out when everyone else was making excuses." She looked directly at James. "You were right to do what you did. I couldn't see it then, but I see it now." As they drove away, I felt a complex mix of emotions: relief that the visit had gone well, pride in the boundaries we had maintained, cautious hope for a healthier family dynamic in the future. James put his arm around my shoulders as we watched their car disappear down the street. "You okay?" he asked. "I am," I said, realizing it was true. It wasn't perfect, but it was hopeful. "Your sister has changed," he observed. "Not completely, maybe, but meaningfully." I nodded, thinking about the long journey we had all taken since that terrible Christmas moment. "Do you think we'll ever get back to normal?" James considered this. "I think we'll find a new normal. Better than before, because it will be based on truth instead of pretense, on respect instead of fear, on genuine connection instead of obligation." Emma called from her blanket, holding up a block for our inspection. We both turned toward our daughter, her face alight with the simple joy of discovery. "That's what it's all about, isn't it?" I said softly. "Making sure she grows up understanding her worth, knowing that she deserves to be treated with kindness and respect, learning that boundaries aren't mean or selfish, they're necessary for healthy relationships." "Exactly," James agreed. And sometimes it takes a painful moment to teach those essential lessons. As we joined Emma on her blanket, I reflected on the strange, difficult path that had led us here. The Christmas dinner that shattered our family's facade of harmony had also cleared the way for something more authentic to grow in its place. The boundary that seemed so harsh and absolute in the moment had created space for genuine change and healing. And through it all, the most important lesson had been the one James demonstrated when he stood up while everyone else sat silent, that love isn't just warm feelings and family traditions. Sometimes love is a boundary line drawn in the sand. Sometimes it's the courage to say, no more, when someone crosses that line. Sometimes it's the willingness to face conflict rather than enable harm. Emma reached up, offering me the block she had been examining. As I accepted her gift, I made a silent promise to her and to myself I would always be the parent who stood up, the one who protected, the one who taught through both words and actions that she deserved nothing less than respect and care from everyone in her life, no exceptions, not even for family. That was the true gift we had received on that painful Christmas day. Not the presents under the tree or the dinner on the table, but the clarity that came from finally seeing the truth and having the courage to act on it. It had cost us the comfortable illusion of a perfect family, but it had given us something far more valuable, a family built on honesty, respect, and the unshakable commitment to protecting those we love. Looking back at that Christmas dinner 6 months ago, I realized that sometimes the most significant moments in our lives come disguised as catastrophes. What felt like the worst holiday of my life, my sister slapping my baby, my parents sitting in stunned silence, the shock and betrayal overwhelming me, actually became the catalyst for profound healing and growth in our family. Today, as we celebrate Emma's first birthday, I can't help but marvel at how much has changed. The journey hasn't been easy or straightforward. There have been painful conversations, tears shed on both sides, moments of doubt and frustration. But through it all, one thing remained constant: the boundary James and I established to protect our daughter. Emma has no memory of what happened that Christmas day, thank goodness. At 1 year old, she is a bundle of energy and joy, tottering around on unsteady legs, babbling her growing vocabulary, and studying the world with wide-eyed curiosity. The red mark on her cheek faded within hours, leaving no physical trace of Jennifer's momentary cruelty. But for the adults in our family, the impact has been permanent and transformative. My sister Jennifer, once so defensive and self-centered, has done the hard work of therapy with remarkable commitment. She's learned to recognize her triggers, to sit with uncomfortable emotions without lashing out, to take responsibility for her actions instead of deflecting blame. I never realized how exhausting it was, she told me recently, living in constant competition with everyone around me, especially you. Always feeling like I needed to prove my worth, to be the center of attention, to win some invisible contest that only existed in my head. Her vulnerability and self-awareness still surprise me sometimes. The sister who slapped my baby on Christmas is almost unrecognizable in the woman who now approaches our family with humility and respect. My parents, too, have grown through this painful episode. After decades of enabling Jennifer's worst behaviors, they finally recognized the damage their conflict avoidance had caused. Family therapy has helped them understand their role in the dysfunctional dynamic that culminated in that horrible moment at Christmas dinner. "We thought we were keeping the peace," my father admitted during a recent conversation. "But really, we were just kicking problems down the road, letting them grow bigger and more destructive." My mother, always the peacemaker at any cost, has found her voice in a way I never expected. "I was so afraid of conflict that I let my granddaughter be hurt rather than speak up," she told me, tears in her eyes. "I'll never make that mistake again." James, my rock through all of this, has never once said, "I told you so," despite having sensed the danger before anyone else. Instead, he supported me through every difficult conversation, every emotional setback, every step toward healing. His military training taught him about protecting those under his command, but his natural instinct to protect those he loves came from something deeper, an innate understanding of what truly matters in life. As for me, I've discovered strengths I never knew I possessed. For years, I was the accommodator in our family, the one who smoothed things over, who made excuses for Jennifer's behavior, who prioritized family harmony over my own feelings. Becoming a mother changed that calculation fundamentally. Standing up for Emma taught me to stand up for myself as well, to recognize that boundaries aren't selfish, they're necessary for healthy relationships. The road to healing began with James's courageous stand that Christmas day. When everyone else sat frozen in shock or discomfort, he stood up and drew a line that could not be crossed. "You will never touch my child again," he said, his eyes locked on Jennifer's. "Get out of our home." Those words, spoken with quiet authority rather than rage, changed everything. They shattered the illusion that family relationships should be preserved at any cost. They established that Emma's safety and well-being would never be sacrificed on the altar of keeping the peace. In the months that followed, we maintained that boundary with loving firmness. Jennifer was not allowed around Emma until she had demonstrated genuine change through sustained therapy and sincere remorse. My parents were not permitted to pressure us into premature forgiveness or reconciliation. Extended family members who tried to minimize what happened were gently but firmly corrected. The healing didn't happen overnight. Jennifer's initial anger gave way to defensiveness, then to grudging acknowledgement, and finally to genuine remorse. Her therapist helped her uncover the deep-seated insecurities and childhood wounds that had fueled her jealousy and competitive nature. Healing those wounds has been painful, but necessary work. My parents struggled at first with the boundaries we set. Years of enabling Jennifer had created powerful habits that were difficult to break. But as they saw the positive changes that came from holding firm Jennifer, finally getting the help she needed, our family relationships becoming more honest and healthy, they began to understand. Now they are among our strongest allies in maintaining appropriate boundaries. Emma's first birthday celebration marks more than just the passing of a year. It represents a new beginning for our family, built on a foundation of truth, respect, and protection, rather than denial, enabling, and fear. The small gathering we hosted today, with Jennifer present under careful supervision, was a testament to how far we've come. Watching Jennifer interact respectfully with Emma, seeing her follow our parenting guidelines without argument, observing her genuine delight in Emma's joy, these moments filled me with cautious hope. Not that everything would magically return to normal, but that a new, healthier normal might be possible. The past 6 months have taught me profound lessons about family boundaries and what it truly means to love. I've learned that sometimes the most loving thing you can do is say no. That protecting the vulnerable is always more important than maintaining appearances. That real healing begins with truth, however uncomfortable that truth might be. Most importantly, I've learned that my daughter is watching and learning from every interaction she witnesses. By standing firm against mistreatment, James and I are teaching Emma that she deserves respect, that her boundaries matter, that she is worthy of protection. These lessons will shape her understanding of relationships throughout her life. As night falls and I rock Emma to sleep in her nursery, the elephant Jennifer gave her, clutched in her tiny hand, I feel a sense of peace that was unimaginable 6 months ago. The painful Christmas incident that could have permanently fractured our family, instead, became the breaking open that allowed true healing to begin. Emma drifts off to sleep, her features softened by dreams, unaware of the profound changes she has inspired in the adults who love her. I place her gently in her crib and stand watching her for a moment, overwhelmed by the fierce protective love that parenthood has awakened in me. James appears in the doorway, his silhouette familiar and comforting. He wraps his arms around me from behind, and we stand together watching our daughter sleep. "She's changed our lives in more ways than she'll ever know," he whispers. "She's changed our whole family," I reply. "Because of her, we're all becoming better versions of ourselves." James nods against my hair. "That Christmas day was terrible, but I wouldn't change it knowing where it's led us." I turn in his arms to face him. Thank you for standing up when everyone else sat silent, for protecting her when I was too shocked to move, for being the kind of father she deserves. Always, he says simply. For both of you, always. As we leave the nursery, closing the door softly behind us, I carry with me the most important lesson of this difficult journey, that love isn't always easy or comfortable. Sometimes it requires painful honesty, firm boundaries, and the courage to stand alone. But that kind of love, brave, protective, unwavering, is the greatest gift we can give to those who depend on us. If you've ever had to stand up against family pressure to protect someone you love, I'd love to hear your story in the comments. How did you find the strength to draw that line? What happened afterward? Please like and subscribe if this story resonated with you, and share it with anyone who might need to hear that it's okay to set boundaries even with family. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember, sometimes the most loving thing you can do is simply stand up when everyone else sits silent.